So now we're in 1967.
And I get a call
Yes.
late in 67. It must have been, because we'd done the last Can-Am race, so it must have been October, early November. Get a call from Chris. He said, "Hey, Raj, Mr. Ferrari said we can take a car to New Zealand. Do you want to come? I can take one English-speaking mechanic with me." It took me about 30 seconds, so I went to Mark and I said, "Hey, I've got the opportunity." I got on really well with Mark Donahue, who was a great guy. And I enjoyed a lot working for Penske, really did. But to go to Italy and work at Ferrari, shit. So I went to Mark. He said, "Well, just go, leave your stuff here and go and then come back when you're finished."
And who said this to you?
Mark Donahue.
Mark Donahue said,
"Leave your stuff here, and then when you're finished, come back here." So
you didn't have any encounter with Roger before you left?
no,
Okay.
no, nothing.
Right.
Saw Roger very little. He'd come into the workshop at night, all dressed up, having been to some fancy deal. And he'd say, "Place looks like a pigsty." And he'd pick up a broom and he'd be cleaning. He'd been there since 8 o'clock in the morning. It's now 10 o'clock at night, and Roger wants the shop clean. You know,
That's
but
so much him.
That's the way he is. And so I said, "What's the cat?" Chris said, "Well, you've got to come to Italy for at least a few weeks to learn how to build these Dino motors." I said, "Okay." So I'm on the way. I think mid-November I arrived in Maranello, and funny enough, Chris had a very small apartment then, one bedroom, which wasn't big enough for the two of us. So they put me up at the Real Fini in the square in Modena, which was right across the road from Enzo's house. And the guy in the next room to me was Di Tommaso. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he lived there. And so had a great time, really enjoyed, the Italians were very acceptable. Ferrari spoke fairly good English, and the only English-speaking person there was a guy named Mike Parks, who was an engineer.
So you were getting by with translation. You didn't pick up much Italian?
Not at that stage I didn't, because I was only going to be there for a few weeks, and I was going to New Zealand and Australia, and I was out of there. Okay. And so
they almost speak English down there, right?
Almost, yeah, a little bit of accent, you know. But I had a really nice time. They were really nice people, and they were very good to me. And come December, I'm on a plane to New Zealand, and there was 4 races in New Zealand and 4 in Australia. And in those days, most of the Formula One guys went on the Tasman Championship because it was a good break from the cold English rainy weather. And Jimmy Clark, Graham Hill, Rent, Courage, they were all down there for this thing. And Jimmy and Chris were very close in those days. And end results was Jimmy won the championship and we finished second. We won 2 of the races. I think Jimmy won the Tasman. I think Jimmy won 4, but the one we did win, which was important to Chris, was the New Zealand Grand Prix. And got back to Maranello in March, and Mr. Ferrari's secretary came down. He said, "Roger, Mr. Ferrari would like to have lunch with you today." So I took my overalls off, washed my hands, and went across the road to the Cavallino, which was literally from here to that wall. It was just across the road was the restaurant. And there was Mike Parks, Dr. Gozzi, who was the head of public relations for Ferrari, Ferrari, Chris, Enzo Ferrari, Piero, and me. So in those days, I didn't know at the time, but you never ordered with Mr. Ferrari. He ordered the food, and whatever he ordered, you ate. Otherwise, you went hungry. And finished lunch, and he called Chris over and gave him a big hug and a handshake. And he went to the drawer, and he had like a desk. He had a private dining room in the Cavallino, had a desk, and in the desk came out with a fairly big book. Really nice, wow. And it was in Italian. Well, he presented it to Chris. Well, Chris didn't read Italian. And then Gozzi said, "Roger, you're next." So the old man beckons me over. I go over and get the big hug and the handshake. And he goes to the other end of the desk and comes up with a much smaller book. And, it's the memoirs of Enzo Ferrari, and it's in English. So I said to him, "Sign it." And he signed it, Enzo 68. So this didn't make Chris very happy. He got an Italian book that he couldn't read, and I got a
book in
English
language,
signed by Enzo, yeah. So now my time at Ferrari is over. I'm trying to decide in my mind, do I want to go back to Alan Mann in England, or do I want to go back to, because I got stuff in lockers in both places at this stage. And so on the way out, Ferrari says, "Raja, I need to talk with you." So I went to Ferrari's office, and he said, said, Mr. Ferrari, he said, if you would like to stay in Italy with Chris, you can. I said, and do what? He said, a mechanic on the team. I said, wow, so that's great. So that took me about 30 seconds to decide that's what I wanted to be. And short story is, so now it's March 60.
For which effort? Is this for Le Mans?
It was
for
wherever Chris
F1?
went.
Okay.
No, it's wherever Chris went. I went with him. But then shortly, because we go on towards the end of the year, then it starts to spread out a bit. I'm going to Thruxton with Derek Bell and Jackie Hicks in a Formula 2 car, and I think Brambilla and who else drove there. And then the end of 68, Vecchi, who was the chief, said, Roger, you're going to Argentina. I said, Chris driving? No, you do go. So I went to Argentina with Tino Brambilla and Andrea Diadamic and the two Formula 2 cars. And we won the first race with Brambilla in Buenos Aires. And then we went to Cordoba. And I can't remember who won Cordoba, but this is something I'd have to look up. And then Vecchi said, Roger, you can ride with Juan. I said, to where? We're going to now cross Argentina from Cordoba to San Juan. And this guy he introduced me to was a guy named Juan Manuel Fangio, and I got to ride across Argentina with
a drive
Fangio.
across Argentina with perhaps the greatest driver of all time.
Yeah, it was quite a ride. And the thing that stands out in my mind more than anything was all the dead cattle. The second time I got back from Australia, we had another lunch with Enzo. Same people except Parks had gone. This time, calls Chris over, gives him volume 2. And I don't know where those books are. I'd love to see them again. Couldn't read that either.
Still an
so
Italian.
he beckons me over, big hug and a handshake. And he didn't go to the drawer. And I thought, man, I must have pissed him off last year asking him to sign the book. So I started to walk away. I get from here to that wall, and I hear, Roger, vieni qui un momento. So I turned around, and the old man's beckoning me back. So I get another hug, and he's got his hand in the pocket. I got my hand out to shake it, and he's not shaking. Takes his hand out of the pocket, and he gave me a gold watch, which to this day I still have with a prancing horse on the dial. Till the day he passed away, which was 3 years ago now, poor old Chris never got over it. The driver got 2 books in Italian that he couldn't read, and the mechanic got a book signed by Enzo and a gold watch, and poor old Chris, he never got over that. But anyway, I was...
obviously, Enzo thought highly of you and what you
I
had
don't
contributed.
know. It wasn't until later on in life that I read the book that he gave me, and I've just read the latest Enzo book, which is 954 pages. I didn't realize that the engine that we were using was the last engine that son Dino had designed before he passed away. And there was obviously, because on several nights when we were building these things, if it was Fossati or just Bellatani and me would be building things, everybody would have gone home. You hear the door click, Enzo would come down the race shop to the engine build, and he'd just stand there, and he'd just watch. And I mean, it used to bother me a little bit, because it was like, are we doing something wrong? But then I realized later on just how important that engine was to him.
Yeah.
In those days, there were Hillman fuel injections,
Right,
and Herbie's messing about with the springs and the shims and that. And I said, why don't we just turn the bolt in? And he looked at me, typical Englishman, big holes, strong springs, and lots of boost. And that's how I got my nickname, Boost. But Revson sat it on the pole. I think Denny was 4th that year. And we were actually leading with just a few laps to go, and Revson came in and said he had a vibration. Why, we'll never know to this day. But Huey shook the front wheels and sent him on his way. And in the meantime, Al had sailed by and we never caught him, so we finished 2nd.